Here we go. Here we go.
Here we go. One more time. Everybody's feeling fine. Here we go now.
Yes, yes, here we go.
NSYNC has got the flow. Did you know he canceled his tour?
Did he?
I heard a rumor in the
JT?
rumor mill. Yeah. I'm like, of all the people I would never expect. I'm like, he's literally in the same boat with J-Lo. They should just go sail off into the damn
Is it
sunset
not doing
together.
well?
I guess not. People in the TikTok comments were like, yeah, we didn't want Justin Timberlake. We wanted NSYNC. There's a difference.
There is a difference. Yeah. Are people just, are like older celebrities just a little bit tone deaf now? It's not like it was before where it's like the Rolling Stones can keep performing forever because they're the Rolling Stones and their people will keep seeing them over and over.
And it's coming off of like his commentary on Britney Spears. Like, I just
Yeah,
think the
that's a
timing
big
was really
yikes.
bad. If you were going to do that, it probably would have done really well maybe 5 years ago.
Right. Well, and they kept teasing an NSYNC reunion, and then it turns out that they just did a song together for the Trolls movie or some shit.
Yeah. So they like have been showing up as NSYNC in these like press things. Yeah. It was only for the Trolls movie. I'm like, if you're going to do it, just do it. Like, you guys are already all together. You guys are already performing together. Why wouldn't you just give us a reunion tour? Whatever. I don't care. You know who just needs to
miss.
You know who just needs to go on tour together? I'll take who would I take? I'll take JC, obviously.
And Lance. JC and Lance. I would love that.
That's like kind
maybe
of a
even
moment.
Joey. Maybe
Joey's
just the
cool.
three
He
of
can
them.
come. Sorry, Chris. I mean, I don't mean it disrespectfully, but
No. Yeah. JC actually is a great singer.
he's a wonderful singer.
He's a Sag. He's a Sagittarius.
See?
I forget what Lance is. I want to say he's a water sign, but I'm not positive.
That would make sense. He's just a little emo baby.
I know.
Hi, hello, and welcome. What a treat that we have.
Yes.
For
We are
there.
on a high right now
A little bit.
because we just had our first guest. Well, we are having, because you guys are about to hear her right now.
Yes, for this person to be our first guest is so special. It is, of course, among the many things that we like to discuss on the pod. And she has done such amazing work in the field of self-care. And just the conversation that we had was so eye-opening. I think it'll be really important for our audience, the feelers, no matter where you are on your self-care journey and how you're currently defining it, because that's definitely something we get into. So I suppose before we get into the interview, we don't really have a what's in your cup at the moment, nothing fancy.
Yeah,
But because,
my
girl,
cup's
it's a-
all the way over there, and it's coffee from 4 hours ago.
It's a school night, so we're staying hydrated. It's water.
Period. Yeah. What's in your life cup? A quick life cup.
A quick life cup would be, I'm doing better than last week, even though my second class did start. I think having them stacked in the way that they are,
Yeah.
I got a little bit of an introduction of what it was going to be like.
Yeah.
So I was able to be prepared. And just trying to deal with the guilt of it all. I'm feeling very guilty for not being present in the way that I want to be present because the workload is immense, and just trying not to judge myself for that or be too hard on myself, because I know that it's just a short-term thing for a long-term solution, which is what I want to do at the end of it. So I think I'm okay. I'm trying to be a little bit more gentle with myself. I'm nearing the end of my cycle, so that makes a difference in how I feel about it too. And overall, good. I am getting to the point where I'm like, I can still enjoy my summer. I don't have to be locked up in the I call it the dungeon. Which I should not call my bedroom, because it's a lot more of an oasis than that. But
It is.
It's like when I have to really like focus, it's called the dungeon. Girl, I said I was going to hit up the libraries. I said I was going to be out and about studying.
That's what I'm about to do after this.
Yeah.
I'm going to a coffee shop I will not disclose. Again. Her daughter always not really makes fun of me, but whenever she asks me where I'm going and I'm going to a coffee shop, she's like, "You're going to the coffee shop again?"
You're like,
I'm like,
wow,
"Yeah,
do
girl,
you
I'm trying to
really
work
go
to
out
make that
often?"
Disneyland money."
Exactly. And then she gets it. Then
Yeah.
she's like, oh, you're getting money for Disneyland? Okay.
Yeah.
Then she's like on board. She's like, okay, bye. See you later.
Bye. Literally walks to the window and waves to me as I drive away. I'm like,
I want
oh,
to see her
damn.
go. I want to see her go.
Yeah.
The sweetest.
Yeah.
Anyway, other than that, your big project that you have to address after this.
Yeah.
Is that really?
I just feel a little, I think my answer is that I'm processing. I feel a little helter skelter. And it just could be because we were up late figuring out some stuff and we ditched the bane of our existence, Riverside.
Yeah. Riverside.fm. I'm absolutely coming for you. The worst podcasting platform ever in life. I'd rather use a calculator if I'm being frank.
And it's mostly their customer service. We're both like customer service girlies.
Hospitality. Hello.
Be honest and be helpful. And if you can't get a solution, again, be honest.
We're not going to hate you.
Don't make me go in circles with you for weeks, if not months.
Yeah.
Months.
It
we
was
were
just,
experiencing
it
issues
was
with
just
them.
the same issue over and over again. We're like trying to use this editor that they promote to the end of the earth, that it's like the best editor and like your all-in-one podcasting platform, record and blah 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 and do all this stuff, and the editor is just not performing in the way that they claim it's supposed to.
It glitches, it freezes. The more that you edit, the more your lips and your audio go off, and it's been a headache. And so finally last night at 10:30 p.m. we broke up with them and we got a refund. And so now we're on Squadcast and we love it so far. So, shout out Squadcast. But yeah, maybe that's why I just feel a little, and I also got a promotion in work that I'm still settling into while I'm also still having to do my old role. It's like kind of like half and half until
you're in a transitionary period.
Yeah, until we can hire somebody to be the old me.
I see.
So I feel just like a little bit like everything's going on at once.
Like wonky.
Yeah.
It's sounding a little disjointed.
Very. That's how I feel. Disjointed.
Okay.
Yesterday actually was like good though. I got a massage and like I did some things to feel a little bit more grounded. But yeah, we just have a lot going on. We're going to go to Disneyland. 3 days after we go to Disneyland, I'm like going out of town for 2 weeks. And so it's
a hot girl summer.
It is a hot girl summer. I'm trying to be out and about. So yeah, that's how I'm checking in. I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, still alive, but I'm barely breathing.
Yeah. There's a lot that goes into this effort mentally. A lot of mental effort. Because you have all these things ruminating and circulating in your brain where you're like, okay, I have all these questions I want to ask her. And is it going to go well? Is it not going to go well? What if the technology fails us? Like, we are not lying. 11 p.m. we broke up with Riverside and we decided on a completely new platform because we were not going to risk something not working for our first guests, who we respect very much and we respect their time. So it's like, there's no way we were just going to use Riverside knowing how many issues it had.
Right. So yeah, without further ado, we're going to get into our chat with Taylor Elyse. Hello. Welcome to the Empaths Anonymous podcast. Today we have Taylor Elyse Morrison. She is a founder, facilitator, and coach making well-being and personal development more accessible. Through her company, Inner Workout, and her book of the same name, Taylor supports people's journey to know, care for, and become their full selves. Welcome to the show, Taylor. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So we're going to ask you to start out, as we always share with our audience, what's in our cup. What's in your cup today?
Yes. So literally what's in my cup is boring. It's water. It's pretty hot here and I'm trying not to get a migraine. But my treat drink is a recess. I love those.
Ooh,
so I'm probably going to go grab one of those later.
Oh, I love the recess. Yeah. What's your favorite flavor?
But it is so hard. So they had this limited edition margarita one. That was actually my favorite. I have not been able to find it since, but I like the blood orange one too.
Ooh, yeah. The blood orange one is my fave.
Blood orange. I would usually go for that flavor in anything.
Yeah.
So refreshing.
Great choices. Yeah. And then how are you checking in today? What's in your cup of life?
Yeah. In my cup of life, it goes back to it just being like a really hot week. I'm moving slower today. I took a little nap before this. I just am trying to let myself ease into things because I know that, especially with the heat, I can just get a migraine and it will take me out.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. It's starting to get hotter here too, but we have a little bit of a breeze and you're in Chicago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not quite as humid here as it is there. So we're easing into the hot summer though.
Yeah. We definitely have more of a desert dry heat.
I prefer, honestly. I
I
can do a
prefer it
lot
too.
hotter when it's dry.
Yeah. The humidity is so tough. I can't deal with it personally. So I definitely empathize with your to get a migraine, because those can just really, sometimes days at a time.
And then it takes you out. But
Yeah.
getting right into it, so we're so excited. I know that you say that you are not like the guru or the expert, but in your book that you outlined that this is for multiple people, one of them being your younger self, the other one being overachievers, and we definitely identify as that, self-aware and like chronic overachievers. We took the assessment, like we said, we received our results, which were great. I'm so excited to start some of the practices. Could you expand on the different dimensions of self-care?
Yeah. So I'm so glad that you got to take the assessment. Let me know if you have any questions.
Okay.
But the idea behind the take care assessment, I actually started it a couple weeks into COVID when I was like, oh, shoot, I had this whole vision for how I could support people with self care that was in person. And now that's not a possibility for, at the time we thought it was 2 weeks, but we know how that actually turned out. And what I wanted to support people through were these 5 dimensions of well-being. And so I thought, okay, if people could take an assessment, figure out where they're at, and we could offer up something for them to do. So there's 5 dimensions of well-being. They're inspired by this yogic concept called the koshas. The first is physical, and it's all about the conversation that you're having with your body. So, what are you saying to your body? Are you saying kind things when you look in the mirror? But also, what is your body saying to you? How attuned are you to your body's need? So it's less about you need to eat this food or you need to move your body in this way, and more, can you know what you need? Then there's the energetic dimension that is about your breath. That's also about the way energy moves through your life. We all have these experiences of doing a task or hanging out
Right.
with a person that energizes us, or doing a hangout with a person and you're like, I just need to go to bed. That was exhausting. And so that's a little bit about how energy moves in our life. Then we've got the mental and emotional dimension. That is all about what comes into our brain and out of our brain. So, our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, the way we're using our brain, what we're consuming. Are we consuming content that is energizing and challenging in a good way, or stuff that is getting us down? And then that's all supported by sleep. There's the wisdom dimension, which is about being present. I believe that we're
Right.
most powerful when we're most present, being able to hear your inner wisdom and then actually take aligned action based on what it says. And then finally, there's the bliss dimension, which is all about being connected to the truest expression of yourself, connected to community, and connected to something bigger than you, whatever that means to you. So that was like a really whirlwind tour,
Yeah.
but hopefully that helped.
Yeah, I think that we both, ironically, scored the highest in bliss. So we're like good in that category. But that really just leads back to what our purpose is for this podcast and for this community, is really having that joy and highlighting other people who are living as their authentic self. The thing that I scored the least in is the body. So what you said exactly was what I say to myself, and I know this about myself, but really having to reframe the words that I'm speaking to myself. How can somebody who is also experiencing negative self-talk, what's something, because it seems like sometimes it's a night and day thing. Oh, just stop talking bad about yourself. I'm like, yeah, okay, but what's the road to that? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of body neutrality. I think, to your point, we tend to be like, okay, I'm looking in the mirror and I'm saying, you're so ugly, or whatever it is that you're saying.
Right.
And now I'm just supposed to go to body positivity and be like, oh, Taylor, you are amazing, blah, 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 blah. And it just feels fake.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
I really love body neutrality and saying, thank you, body, for getting me from point A to point B. Or I've started taking dance classes again recently. Thank you, body, for like holding that a little longer than you could last week, or for supporting my weight as I did this move. So
Yeah.
making it less about how my body looks and more about objectively what my body is doing to keep me alive or to keep me doing the things that I enjoy.
Yeah. So having that moment of gratitude and saying, thank you for getting me through this yoga class. Thank you for allowing me to live my life. And I'm not really having to think about all the things that you're doing because you just do it.
Right.
The one thing that, like you said with dance, the one thing that's been really connecting me is yoga and really just listening to my body in a different way than I have before, and knowing that some days I'm going to show up, I'm going to have more balance, I'm going to have more flexibility, and some days I'm going to show up and I'm like, I'm just going to get through the class. And that's my intention. And that's totally okay, is that's part of the journey, right?
Absolutely.
So back into what we were talking about with Danny starting her self-care journey and learning what that means for her. Somebody who's just starting out and maybe culturally we're taught that we're not putting ourselves first, we have to put others first, or it's just a foreign concept. What's a great way to start putting these things into practice? I know that we have the tool of the take care assessment, but when somebody's just so overwhelmed and I have no idea where to start or what self-care even means for me, what do you suggest?
I love this question because you're right. Sometimes it's sit with 75 questions. That's a lot. So
Right.
I would go back to the definition that I use and Inner Workout uses of self-care, which is self-care is listening within and responding in the most loving way possible. And really thinking of self-care less as I need to pencil it into my calendar, I need to add it to my to-do list, and more, how can I start having a conversation with myself? And that starts with listening. So I would recommend finding a little time in your calendar. And by little, it could be a minute where instead of listening to a podcast, we all love podcasts here, but
Right.
I find for myself, sometimes I'll fill every moment of my day with a podcast or with music. When can I find a minute to just eat and say, how are you today, Taylor? It sounds so simple, but I promise if you start to give yourself space to speak, things will bubble up. You'll notice,
Right.
oh, my leg is tight. Or, oh, I'm actually feeling sad about that thing I thought I was over. And then you can get into the loving responses of because I am tight, let me spend a couple of minutes stretching. Because I'm sad, let me, however you like to respond to sadness, let me journal, let me talk to a friend, whatever that might
Right.
look like. But it starts with the listening.
We've talked about how we are not the 5 a.m. girlies. You know, the people on TikTok who are like, you need to get up at 5 o'clock and you have to have your day before your 9 to 5.
Yeah.
We're not those people.
Well, they say my 5 to 9 before my 9 to 5. I'm like, my 5 to 9 is sleeping.
Good for you, though. Right. So it can be kind of discouraging as
Yeah.
somebody who's like, that's just not how my body clock works.
Right.
It can be discouraging because that looks like that's the attainable thing of I need to be able to get out of bed at this time and go to the gym and make this checklist for myself. And for me, like checklists feel so constricting. So like you said, being bombarded with content all of the time, even if it's things that we love, even if it's things that are nourishing ourselves and our brain, having that like minute of alone time and quiet is so beneficial to my day. To me, having a 5-minute meditation is way more important or way more efficient than having a 4-hour routine in the morning that is just going to make me feel like I'm achieving.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what I love about I mean, I'm so biased, but framing self-care as listening within and responding in the most loving way possible, because you and I are going to listen and hear different things and have different responses that feel loving. And so it
Right.
really makes it so that you are your expert, not the people on TikTok
Right.
who are doing the morning that works for them.
So if
Yeah.
you're listening and because I personally, I'm like, every time that I'm not getting out of bed at my first alarm, I'm like, gosh, I failed. Like my day is completely waste. So if you're listening and that's you and you feel a little bit of relief and comfort for that, know that it's okay to not have to subscribe to what everyone else's self-care routine is.
Right.
And it's okay if that's their routine.
Yeah, perfect. Everyone has different routines that work for them the best. So if you're an early bird and you're up at 6 o'clock in the morning or before the sun anyway, and that's the time that you want to use to get your workout in or get in your meditation, perfectly fine. But we don't all have to subscribe to the same routine. It's just not how humans work.
Right.
So I do like opening up a discourse about just different ways that could look for different people and listening to yourself does require that quiet and really does bring us back to being in that present moment. Because I think a lot of the time we just choose to distract ourselves because we know what happens in the quiet. Like for me, I'm always playing something and I'm always having something on. Even if I'm trying to focus and do schoolwork or do other things, so many times I'll catch myself with the TV on and I'm scrolling on my phone. And I'm like, which audio am I listening to? So I, a lot of the time, feel big struggle to quiet my surroundings because having that introspective, even if it is just 1 minute, I know will probably stem into some feelings maybe I don't want to feel. It's kind of
That's
like
real.
pushing them off. Yeah. I'm just like pushing them off because I know, like yesterday, I struggled a little bit. And so I was doing my schoolwork and I kept going back to the same thought, but I was in my bedroom by myself and it was a little bit quiet. So I noticed in that moment, I was like, okay, there is something I want to respond to, but instead it started to turn into like more of a journal. I was like writing out a reply to a text message, but it was more so about like how I was feeling in that moment. So I just threw it in my notes app and I'm like, this is more of like an introspective moment for me. So I am seeing myself like getting to that point and I am like enjoying it because I can see how it's beneficial, even if it's just the 30 seconds it took me to open my notes app.
Yeah, it doesn't have to take a lot of time. And I'm so glad to hear you all say that because, again, with the TikTok girlies, we have it has to be 4 hours, it has to be so long, but a few moments can make a world of difference.
Exactly.
Yeah. We're big fans of checking in with ourselves
Yeah.
and with each other. But it
Oh, yeah, all
often
the time.
becomes more of like an effective, like I'm speaking this out loud. I think sometimes friends can be part of our self-care because I'm speaking this out loud to you, but actually it's what I needed to tell myself. So do you think that there's some aspects where there can be like communal care? And how does that play into
Absolutely.
that?
Yeah, I love this question because self care in and of itself can just be hard, especially when we're talking to achievers because we're like, shouldn't we be doing this other thing that theoretically I could make more money for, an award for, get a promotion?
Yeah,
And so
girl.
it can take work just to get us to the point of let me care for myself.
Yeah.
And then, especially I would assume for people who are listening to this show, when we say, wait, now I'm caring for myself, great, check, pat on the back. But you're telling me that I should invite other people into my care. So I should be vulnerable and share this hard thing that's happening? Absolutely not. Even if you can get people to the point of self care, community care can be difficult because it requires you to acknowledge you can't do everything on your own. You're not meant to do everything on your own. And then it also requires you to show up as less than perfect. And I, speaking from experience, don't love doing that.
No. Same. Vulnerability is hard. But I think that finding a safe person, like she's the friend that I have that I know I can say anything to her and she's not going to judge me and it's not going to be like dismissive or, oh, let's find a solution. Sometimes I don't need a solution. Sometimes I just need somebody to listen. And I think that that can
Same.
be part of care too, as we talked about last week. Like you have to be a good friend to have good friends. And I think a lot of times that's care.
A lot more work than people realize, I think, to show up for your friends in the way that you want them to show up for you, especially if for us specifically, we've had so many experiences within our relationships where we've always shown up 150%. And when that's not reciprocated, that rejection is just so defeating and you feel unloved or your needs are unmet.
It is. And like you said, it takes work. I'm in a partnered relationship. I've been married for, it'll be 7 years in a few weeks. And it's work. Marriage is work. And people talk about that. It's also, if it's too much work, then maybe there's something else going on. But it takes intention for us to
Right.
continue to grow. And I think about my deepest friendships, and there's a similar level of work. Like I have two really close girlfriends. One is moving, one it has moved across the country, another is moving across the country. And we have a standing hangout that we have where we come together and we put it on. And if it needs to get rescheduled, we try and reschedule it. And we're doing these things to make sure that our friendship is maintained. And I think in our society, we like to think that friendship just happens. You just find that person and you hang out, but any relationship takes investment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Something that we talk about too, just in our own specific cultures, is that sometimes community can result in self-abandon, and that when you're constantly thinking of others, how then do I have any time for self-care? Do you feel like for women of color that there's like that added layer of difficulty or pressure with taking care of ourselves because it's so ingrained in us to think of our community first?
That's the short answer. Yeah, I do think there
Yeah.
is. I just think of some of the women in my life who I have seen put others first, sometimes to their detriment, and how in many cases that can be lifted up, exalted as, oh, look at how selfless this person is. And I think there's a way to have a balance to show up for
Right.
other people, but also to say, hey, I can't show up in that way because that's going to cause harm to me. And a lot of times when we start doing that, it can be confronting to people. And we have to remind ourselves
Yeah.
that that's about them and maybe the fact that they didn't realize they could say no to these things they've been doing all the year. It's less about us.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think so
Yeah,
many of
right.
us have just been modeled certain ways to show up that aren't helping us in the long term.
Especially because in women of color, and if you are one of the only women in your family, it's almost as if you have to take that on as a personality trait, even if it doesn't really come very innately, because it's almost as if there's this idea of what else would you have to offer
Mm.
other than to serve the people around you or to serve your community. So it is sometimes, without us even realizing it, pretty demoralizing, because you're putting me as a woman, and then secondly as a woman of color, in this very small box that I could literally just burst out of. We talk about that all the time, is when other people project onto you maybe some of the insecurities that they're feeling about them not being able to say no. So when we first started to say no, it was like, oh my gosh, we're so selfish.
Yeah. And
We
again,
really grappled with that.
it's about them, not about us. It
Yeah.
goes back
Right.
Yeah.
to what we were talking about around self-care and like being your own expert. You
Yes.
have to be grounded enough in the fact that this is what's right for you, that when someone else is saying you're so selfish or you're so whatever, you're able to come back to, okay, yeah, that's your stuff. That's what you believe. But what I know to be true
Mhm.
is this. And it's
Mhm.
not even that you have to clap back at them. It's just you can feel rooted in your decision.
Setting boundaries is definitely self-care, but sometimes what I'm experiencing is that it feels like Danny said selfish, but it also just feels yucky. Like I almost feel like the bad guy sometimes where I'm like, well, should I really have said no? Like I probably could squeeze that in, or what are they thinking of me now? Withholding your boundaries is so difficult. And I think that when we start our self-care journeys, we think it's going to be rainbow and butterflies and everything's just going to be so much better in our life. But sometimes self-care is hard and it's not always fun, because sometimes it also involves reparenting yourself or rewiring your brain. What advice would you give to somebody who's running into that wall of, I'm trying to practice self-care, but it's so vulnerable, like you said, or it's making me feel less than, fill in the blank? Do you have any advice for people who are trying to have self-care practices but are, running into these issues?
Yeah. A couple things. I had a therapist on my podcast, Oludara Adi, and she said this thing that has just stuck with me because it's so simple. And she said, start safe and start small. And I think about that a
Mm.
lot because perhaps maybe you decided to say, I'm not coming home for Thanksgiving, and that's 0 to 60. And there are a lot of maybe smaller,
Right.
safer things you could do to work your way up to that. So that's something I'm
Mhm.
thinking about. I can have a tendency to over explain why I can and cannot do something. And so
Yes.
Yeah.
that's one of my smaller things, is just saying, hey, I can't make that work. I just had that this weekend where I was like, I need to justify all of these things. And I was just like, I'm sorry, I can't make that work this weekend. It was a last minute request. The other thing that I would add, I really would go back to what support do you need? Whether it is a friend who can be an accountability buddy or someone who can give you like a pep talk beforehand or sit with you afterwards when you're feeling a little shaken.
Mhm.
Is it working with a therapist? Is it working with a coach? Is there some other support that you can add for yourself in this space where it feels really uncomfortable and vulnerable? So I think those would be my 2 tips. First, try and like right size what you're doing so you're not going so far that you immediately revert back and are like, no, that was too much. And then see how
Right.
you can gather people around you to not get rid of the discomfort, but make it a little easier.
Yeah.
Right. Help you through those moments, especially if it's someone who's close to you and they know the kind of journey that you're on and they know that you're trying to practice this self-care, and things like that can be very difficult. There are times where I'm typing out long responses and I have to go back and proofread a lot, and I'm like, that doesn't need to be there, that doesn't need to be there. And it ends up being this short, sweet, small package that gets the point across in kindness. And I didn't have to overshare or over explain why I made that choice. And it does feel good to just press send and just, that's what I'm saying. And I didn't need 150 words to do it.
No.
No.
Yeah, that. Start small and start safe.
Yeah.
I'm going to start telling myself that
Very
as well.
good
Thanks for
advice.
sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to switch gears a little bit because one of the things I was really excited to talk to you about was your journey with getting diagnosed with ADHD and just neurodivergence in general. Something that I've really been researching and exploring for the last 2 years, and I'm actively looking for a psychologist to help me and get a diagnosis, if any. Can you tell in short a little bit about your journey of discovering that you have ADHD?
Kind of like you, it was something that I had noticed people in my life were getting diagnosed
Mm-hmm.
and or people in my life that I feel somewhat similar to had gotten diagnosed as kids and it just wasn't something they were bringing up as adults.
Right.
And I was like, okay, these people who I feel like I have a lot in common with are all having some type of neurodivergent diagnosis. I also have a good amount of neurodivergence in my family.
Okay.
Not that it always is genetic, but it can run in families. So that was another thing. And I had a moment where I have a portfolio career. I have multiple things going on in my career. And I was like, you know what? Most people like don't have to do this to stay engaged in their career. And I
Right.
thought of it as the same way a lot of people with ADHD will have to have this music going and I have this going so I can get in the right zone. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm doing that with my career. So I went online, I found a psychologist. Actually, before that, I did find an appointment, but I did a lot of research and I like found online assessments that psychologists use. And I started thinking back to my childhood. And I also realized that for me as a Black woman who grew up in predominantly white environments, there was a lot of masking that I was doing because I felt like if I did something outside of the norm, it wouldn't just be Taylor doing it. It would be like all Black people doing this.
Yep.
Yeah.
I also had a lot of structure in my home and I'm decently smart. And so there are just these factors that really could mask what was going on until I got to college and all of a sudden everyone was like smarter than me. And that was hard. And then I think, again, when I went from working full time to being self employed, that was another, like, anytime my structure got disrupted, was like, oh, I'm not actually great at creating structure for myself. And there's a whole bunch of other symptoms, but that's what showed up for me. And then I sought out a diagnosis and I have inattentive ADHD. So
Okay.
that's the type that I show up as.
Yeah. That's so interesting to know that there's so many different types. And then we also found from the book, right, the umbrella of what is under neurodivergence. And it was just so many different things that we would have never really expected to be there. It is refreshing and probably felt nice for you to finally have something to explain how you were functioning and feeling for the majority of your life without a diagnosis. And you're like, oh, a lot of this makes sense now.
Yeah, it was pretty funny because my husband was like, oh, there's a lot of things that I thought were your personality that are actually ADHD symptoms. And
Mhm.
so that's just been a funny thing to be like, oh yeah, that is Taylor and that's also a symptom of ADHD. I'll say a big thing for me, it's called RSD, rejection sensitivity something. I'm forgetting what the D is.
Okay.
And that's something I resonate with a lot, of just taking rejection like super personally and having this kind of outsized emotional reaction around it. There's some of the emotional parts of ADHD that I didn't see talked about as much when I was a kid, but I resonated with those really deeply.
Yeah, that's what's really interesting when I'm looking into it is I've always known that I'm sensitive and a deep feeler, and seeing how much of it could be, I mean, I can't say for sure yet, but how much of it could be related to neurodivergence, and just the relief that, okay, I'm not crazy, or I'm not dramatic or overly sensitive. It's my brain, and that's completely okay. It offers like a sense of freedom, and it also offers okay, now I have a roadmap for how I can care for myself better. Because some of my family members are like, you're in your 30s. Like, why does it matter if you have ADHD or OCD or whatever it is?
Matters so much.
Yeah, because now I know how to better take care of myself. And it also just takes this huge weight off of me that, like, it's not me messing up. I'm just wired differently. And that's okay.
Absolutely. It just gives you language. I talked about in my book when I first found out that I was a highly sensitive person. And now I'm like, oh, there's probably connections between that. Actually, don't quote me on this, but I think HSP is not a diagnosis, but I have seen someone say it does fall under a type of neurodivergence. And I remember when I first read about that, it was like, oh, everyone does not feel in the same way that I do.
Right.
Oh, okay. You start to see that the way your brain works is not necessarily how everyone else's brain works. And then you can treat yourself with kindness accordingly.
Right. Because then you're sitting there and you're like, no wonder I was so affected by this when the other person acted like it didn't happen almost. We recently learned that too. We're always talking about HSP versus empath and what means what and how do you know which one you are and are you both? And so learning that HSP was under the umbrella as well, and it was on the spectrum of personality, was so eye-opening for us, because when we started the podcast, I do believe it was Christina who came up with the way she did it. Was like just randomly one day, and you could tell the light bulb was like, I have a name for the podcast, Empath Anonymous. And I'm like, exactly. So it just really does feel like you're gravitating more toward defining things for you, like you said, that will give you the roadmap and the language to help you navigate through life as an adult, because that's very important to learn that as an adult.
Right. Just because we're not kids anymore doesn't mean that we have everything figured out and that we should just know how to move about the world. It's like, I understand why there's such an emphasis when in diagnosing kids is because they don't have the tools developed. But even though I'm an adult, I have a right to know myself and how I work.
Yeah. I was just talking to the owners of one of our favorite local bookshop, and he was telling me he got diagnosed at 48.
Oh, wow.
And he was like, it changed my life to be able to talk about what my brain was doing all of these years. So I don't think it's too late ever.
Never.
Yeah. Piggybacking off of that, do you think that neurodivergent people, in your opinion, have a different relationship or different practice of self-care? I know we all have different practices, but do you think that there's a different way that neurodivergent people experience self-care?
Oh, this is a great question. And like you said, this is purely my opinion. What I will say is that I wrote the book before I got diagnosed.
Okay.
And what I realized is a lot of what I did is what worked for my neurodivergent brain, and that there's a lot of flexible structure in the way that I talk about self-care. Structure can be so good for ADHD brains. So to know that I am going to move my body in some way every morning, and there gets to be novelty. So this morning I did yoga. Tomorrow morning I might do kickboxing. The next morning I might just dance to a song for 2 minutes. But I'm committed to moving my body because I know it changes the way I experience the rest of my day. Those types of things work well for my neurodivergent brain, where there continues to be novelty and options, but there's some guardrails around it. I would also say certain things like remembering what options you have. Like I said, I have inattentive. Sometimes it can be out of sight, out of mind. So something I'll encourage when I'm working with people one-on-one is, okay, if you create a list of ways you can care for yourself, a self-care toolkit, put it where you can see it, whether that's like a Post-it or something in your notes app. One of my clients made like a Notion document that said break in case of emergency. But having that, okay, I can see it. It's right here. I don't have to go searching for it.
Yeah.
Is another thing that can help. I would say that I don't know if the experience of care in itself is different because I believe it's so individualized, but the way at least I talk about it is supportive for my neurodivergent brain.
Right.
I see.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't like having things set in stone the same every day. It really freaks me out. I start to panic a little bit. So I'm like, oh, every day is going to be the same for the rest of my life. But if I have, like you said, I know that I'm going to do some kind of movement every day, or I know that like I can either journal or maybe I can, do another activity that helps me feel centered, but it doesn't have to be the same thing every single day. And that's okay. Every day can look different because I think I put so much pressure on myself of like, I need to get up and go on a walk every day at 7 a.m. And when it doesn't happen, I'm like, dang it. But it's okay that every day looks different.
Yeah. And I would say like for other neurodivergent brains, they thrive on doing the exact same thing until they're bored of it. And it goes back to the listening within and responding in the most loving way possible. Like you may listen, respond, and it's like, take that walk at 7 a.m. for 7 months. And then one day you listen and you start taking the walk and it feels really annoying and you realize, okay, I got to start swimming or doing something else.
Right.
And
So
that's
true.
okay. You're
Mhm.
not doing self-care wrong. You're actually doing it right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I love that it's so applicable to different brains, whether you're neurotypical and neurodivergent, that you can apply the listening practice. Anyone can apply it to their life, whatever it is that they've got diagnosed or not. For me, I was recently diagnosed with general anxiety disorder. On the depression side, it's called something very specific when it goes in waves. I forget the actual name of it, but when depression comes and
Yeah.
goes in waves, it was a secondary diagnosis of mine. And so understanding now that I have, even just with that, I've been diagnosed with anxiety and that the worry is something that my brain is doing, then I do now have the tools to understand what it means to deal with my anxiety. So it's the same way of just listening to your body. Okay, I'm having a very anxious thought. What can I do about it? Because now I know. I would encourage, I'm such a huge advocate of therapy always. People who necessarily can't get in front of a therapist, the take care assessment is like a great way to start. I love a quiz, so I will take any quiz. If you give me the link, I'm taking it. So,
Right. I'm like, tell me about myself. I need to know.
yes. How many different personalities do I have? Yeah. So it's been really good. I enjoyed the questions. When I take an assessment like that, I always try to answer as fast as possible because for me, if I overthink a question, I'm not going to answer honestly. So I flew through it and she's like, "You're done already?" I'm like, "I have to do it fast."
I
I
had to
love that
sit
you
with
know that
each
about yourself.
question.
Yes. Because I've done it before and I'm like, "Ooh, like what's the best answer here?" Instead of answering like my honest, like truthful answer. So I knew
You're
that
like
like
trying to win the assessment.
exactly. Yes. And I'm like, gosh, I can't do anything without having to get an A plus.
Okay, overachiever.
Exactly.
I was like having to really sit with each question. It took me a good 20-25 minutes because I had to literally be like, okay, how do I feel about this? And I'm like, is this normal that I'm literally having to analyze myself for every single question? But I also enjoyed it because each section of the assessment, like I really got to check in with myself. How do I like view my body, or like how am I experiencing balance or bliss or all these other different aspects? I got to have these little mini check-ins along the way, but I do think that I overthought it a little bit.
I've had people say that like just doing the assessment even before they get their results is this act of like reflection and care.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, I never asked myself these questions."
Right.
Yeah.
They were very introspective. The first one, I can't remember what it was, but it just hit me. I'm like, oh, this is how it's going to go. Okay.
Because it was just like
it changes every time. So I don't know
Yeah.
which one your
It
first
just
one was.
requires you to
Oh,
be like
okay.
very open and honest from the jump. So I can appreciate something like that because then I know I'm going to get real results for myself.
It's the same questions, but they're in a different order.
Yeah.
So you'll always get a different first one.
In your book, you said you were talking about stress and how millennials in general experience this high weight of stress, Gen Z even more. We're always having these conversations about what happened with our generation. Like, why are we experiencing so much stress, relationship issues, vulnerability issues, mental health? As far as stress, is there a threshold that we can experience, and how, once we hit a certain point, what are good ways that we can return back to our self-care practice?
When you are operating at a level of stress, whether it's low level or high level, it starts to build up. And eventually it's going to bubble over, whether that is you having physical symptoms, you having mental and emotional symptoms. And so I think we can trick ourselves and say, oh, I'm handling everything well. But then it gets to be one of those situations where you're like, oh, I've got everything covered. And then you stub your toe and all of a sudden you're bawling.
Right.
You're like, okay, maybe
Yeah.
I don't. So in terms of coming back to a baseline, there's two parts of that. So one, I would think about what structurally can you do to support yourself in the midst of stress. Not all stress is bad. And there's like interesting research around how the way we think about stress can change the way we receive it. But how can I set up my life so that things like urgency, for example, how can I set up my life so that everything doesn't feel like it needs to happen now or it's the end of the world? How can I set up my life so that if I have to have difficult conversations or do things that cause me stress, I have support before or after? So there are some structural things that you can do. And then I guess I kind of led into the second piece of it is having those pieces of support. Breathing is a big one that can help move cortisol, the stress hormone, out of your system. And so as simple as just taking extended exhales, making your exhales longer than your inhales can, in the moment, reduce your stress level so that you can address what's going on. Simple movement practices can be useful. You mentioned doing yoga, doing some sun salutation, doing some light stretches might help. And then I personally find journaling, reflective practices to be pretty helpful. I would say for me, I have a rule for myself. I also have generalized anxiety that when I start to feel anxious, I make art or I move my body. So lately it's been taking a lot of walks outside when it's not like ridiculously hot or playing piano.
Oh, nice.
Those are the things that I do. So I would encourage you to experiment for yourself of what are the things I can do. There are the research-backed things, obviously.
Right.
And I guess piano, other things are research-backed as well. But also, what is research-backed for you to help reduce your stress and anxiety?
It sounds like I need to bring my watercolors back out.
You do?
I bought them at the beginning of the pandemic, and I'm like, I'm going to be a watercolor artist.
And your Legos.
You should.
Oh, and my Legos, the botanical line of adult Legos. They're like
My friend has one of those. Yeah.
Yes, I love them so much. And they're so easy to just zen out. You really don't have to think that much about it. And then you get a beautiful piece of artwork at the end of it. Those things I do recognize have helped me in the past. I just need to reintegrate them back into my practices.
Yeah, I think
I
I
love
need to
that.
find some things, because now I'm thinking about it and I'm like, I think that I try to bulldoze my stress and that doesn't really work. Like, for example, I know that I have a project at work that's due. And I'm like, oh, after this, I'm going to have to go to the coffee shop. I'm going to have to be there until 9 o'clock or whenever. Like, I have to keep doing it until it's done. And for me, that just makes it more paralyzing. And then I start having the racing thoughts. And then I'm at my computer and I'm like actually not working. I'm just like going in circles. So I think I need to find some things that can be like a good outlet for me.
Yeah, I think you're really good at the physical stuff.
Because it feels productive. It's a problem. It's not actually I feel productive doing it.
I see.
And so I'm like, is this actually, yes, it is self-care, but I'm obviously doing this because it's like, it's making me feel like I got something done.
Right. You're looking for an end result.
Yeah. I need to find something.
She's looking for the high.
I need to find something that's just a mindless, maybe just coloring or something where it's like there's not an achievement at the end of it.
Yeah.
And I think it can be both. I have really enjoyed playing piano lately and sight reading a song and making a bunch of mistakes. And then a few days later being like, oh, I can play this pretty well. And it does feel really good. And also, I need to have things in my life that I do just because it's fun and silly and it doesn't matter.
Very true.
Exactly. So I think that's my takeaway after this episode. I need to find something that's not for an achievement, that's just for fun or for peace or relaxation that I can do when I have these moments. I break my day into chunks. Well, no, I know that I need to do this right now, so I can't stray from that. Do you have any advice for people who maybe are hard on themselves in their self-care journey and how they can be a little more kind to themselves?
Yeah. My first thought, this is for you specifically, Christina, but my first thought as someone who has been like, I need to do this right now. For example, I have a piece that I know that I want to write that's going to come out in a couple of days. And I just sat here and I could not make it work. And so I went and I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a nap. And let me tell you, when my head hit that pillow, all of a sudden I was like, oh, this is a piece. And I just grabbed my notes app, made a quick outline, and then took a little nap. Yeah. And so I just wonder what would happen if you said, I'm just going to take 5 minutes to do this, or I'm going to take 10 minutes of this allotted time to do something else and just see what it makes possible for you if you're already spinning your wheels. I try to treat a lot of things as experiments and just say, yeah, I'm going to try this out and see what happens. And in terms of being hard on yourself, reminding yourself that one, this may or may not be a new skill that you're building for yourself. And when you're learning a new skill, you're not going to do it perfectly.
Yeah.
So having that mindset and speaking to yourself in that way. And then two, reminding yourself that you're human. And there's a lot happening in the world right now. There's a lot happening in your life right now. Seasons are changing. There might be hormonal shifts that are happening. And so putting your feeling in context and making it less like, I am a bad person who can't get this done in the time I slotted it for, and more, I'm a human who has another need right now. How can I make space for what I need and still find time to do the project that's due or whatever it might be?
Right. Yeah. Going back to having kind words for yourself. I think that's about it. I think we covered all of the topics that we wanted to talk to you about. I'm so excited for our community to hear this episode. I loved this conversation, and we're definitely going to have some really important takeaways from this. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank y'all for having me. And y'all have just such a great chemistry. So I'm excited for you, and I'm honored to be your first guest.
Well, thank you so much.
It means a lot.
It does mean a lot. It does feel special that we have this opportunity, because I just know that it doesn't exist for everybody, especially in this space that we're trying to create with brown young women in their 30s who are just like, what do I do?
Where am I going and how?
Yeah. So this has been definitely
relatable.
So special for us. So we really appreciate you showing us care and kindness.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all your insights.
Well, thank y'all. You enjoy the rest of your day.
All right.
Thank you
too. Bye, Taylor.
Bye.
Bye.
Wow. That was a journey, and I'm really excited and thankful and honored.
Yes, definitely. It felt so warm and welcoming, and she had a lot of patience with us. This is our first guest ever, and I think the conversation went beautifully. She has so much insight on so many things related to self-care. If you are either neurotypical or neurodivergent, you essentially use the same practice, which is listening to yourself.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be different for everyone, and it's going to be different for every brain.
Yeah.
So having that conversation was amazing.
Mint.
Yes.
Yeah. She also shared from another therapist, which I'll have to find her because she said she was on her podcast. I'll find her and link the therapist in our show notes. But start small and start safe.
Yes.
For me, because I'm a very all or nothing bitch. Mm-hmm. I'm okay, if I'm going to do self-care, I'm going to do it to the 200th degree, and that's me perfect. But that's not the point of self-care.
Right.
And same with setting boundaries. Start small and start
definitely
safe.
Goes back to that.
Yeah.
Second episode.
Yeah. Loved having her on. I'm excited for you guys to hear this and let us know what you think. And let us know if there's other guests that you'd like to have on, different types of experts, different questions you want us to answer with an expert. So yeah, we're always open to your feedback and what you're wanting this podcast to be, because it's for you too. This is a community. Yep. It's for all of us.
It's for all of us. We want that input and we want those conversations. So in your rating and review, why don't you drop in there how you practice self-care and how you define it, or how you define it for yourself in this moment, or just hit us up on the socials and just answer us there. You know, we're always posting the reels. So
at Empaths Anon Pod.
Yes. Speaking of the BIPOC artists feature for our gallery wall, we'll include the instructions again, or the information again in the show notes. If you are an artist, or you know of an artist who identifies as Black, Indigenous, or person of color, and they have any medium of art, photography, painting, otherwise, we're looking to highlight them on our gallery wall.
Right here.
One artist a month.
Spot for you right here.
Right here. It's very cutesy. It's meant for this. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same size. We'll make it work. And we want to see those submissions.
Yeah.
So
we're so excited to highlight you. And yeah, I think that wraps everything up.
It does indeed.
It does indeedly do. Let us pray. Spirit, grant me the serenity to listen to myself,
the courage to show up imperfectly,
and the wisdom to not read a bitch when she tries me.
Period.
And so it is.
And so it is what I meant to say. Bye.
Bye, feelers.